think the song sets up a good contrast to what we're going to be talking about. We're looking for that expected joy beyond. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the joy that we find in the journey as we're going. So what we have is we have what we'll call the old bargain, where we look for our joy the other side of something else. As soon as I get this garage cleaned up, I'll be happy. As soon as I get the grass cut, I'll be happy. As soon as I reach my retirement, I'll be happy. As soon as, and happiness is always on the other side of some goal out there that we set ourselves. And so work is what we endure. We got to get through this, don't we? And joy is what comes after the work. That is pretty much the standard model and the way people look at it. So we work now, we have joy later, and we see this everywhere. It can be the weekend. People just can't wait till Friday gets here. Some people nowadays it's Thursday because they only work 4 days a week. Or you work hard all year long so you can hit your vacation, and nothing wrong with a vacation. It's just like you get 50 weeks of misery and then you get 2 weeks of joy. I don't know about you, but I really don't like that option right there. I don't want 50 weeks of misery and just 2 weeks of joy. And then we get on the retirement end of it, and there's some people that life is just miserable, miserable, miserable. It's just horrible. Woe is me. Oh, this is terrible. I can't wait till I can retire and I enjoy life. Now, let's look at that one a second. You get 12 years of public school, 13 if you count kindergarten, then you're going to get your college education for another 2 to 4 to 8 years, and then you've got another 30 years to work. We're looking at, let's keep it simple, I'll say 65 years of woe is me. Oh, life is hard, this is difficult. I'll be happy when I can finally start drawing my Social Security check and my 401 or whatever. And the thing that we forget is life is what passes us by while we're waiting for life to start. That whole 50 weeks you were waiting on your vacation, that was life. 50 weeks of your life. That's 6 days you're waiting for the weekend, or 5 or 4, whatever your schedule is. That's life. On the 65, we're waiting to get to retirement so we can get out from under this horrible burden of having to work all the time. That's life too. Now, I'm not against the weekend. I hope you understand. I'm certainly not against you taking a vacation. I'm certainly not against you retiring. But I think if you're miserable until you hit a goal, we've missed something. So finish that sentence if you would. You'll be happy when? So you're not happy now? You can't be happy now? You can't have joy now until you meet your magical when? And then it's kind of funny, everybody's got different wins that we stick up there in that little slot right there. So Jesus kind of reframes the whole thing. I'll give you John 4:34 there. He said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. What Jesus is telling us is that doing the Father's will fed something deep inside of him. Doing the Father's will was his joy. Now, we're going to have a verse later on when we get to Hebrews where it says, for the joy set before him. But there was also joy here right now. His food was to do the will of the Father. The joy should be a part of every day. And I know it gets paradoxical, and I don't know how to explain all of that. But the joy to do the will of the Father should weave through every day. Now, notice he didn't say it was just knowing the Father's will. That was his joy. And I think that's where some of us make a mistake. We get into our Bible study and our Bible reading, which are good things to get into, and we think, oh, look how much I know. Look how much I understand. And that's not wrong. It's just that the end of education is not knowledge. The aim of education is power. And that education gives you a power to do something. And Jesus said it was the doing that fed him. I think that's a real important distinction. It's not the knowing, it's the doing of the Father's will that brings us the joy. And that's really the joy that we want to weave in through everything, because we are spiritual beings and we are going to stand with the judgment seat of Christ one day and going to give an account for the deeds done in the body. And I don't want to get there after how many years? and I missed all the joy that was possible in the process. The joy is woven in there. So you take something, you start feeding it. You know, people always say you got two dogs in a fight. Which dog's going to win? And the answer is always, well, it's the dog you feed the most. Now, in motivational circles, what that means is all of us have a couple of dogs fighting inside our head. We have the positive, we have the negative. And the question is, okay, which dog is going to win inside my head? It's the one I feed the most. So we'll take that over to spiritual here, because in Galatians 5:17, he said the flesh lusts against the spirit against the flesh. Well, obviously, which one do we want to win? Everybody goes spiritual. Because if the spiritual doesn't win, what's the outcome on the other side of the tombstone? Not very good, is it? Well, how many of us want a not very good outcome on the other side of the tombstone? We go, no, I don't want that. I want a good outcome on the other side of the tombstone. But whatever I feed is going to grow. So if it's the flesh, if I keep focusing on the flesh all the time, that becomes my priority. And this is where you get a little paradoxical balance thing here. I don't know how to live outside the flesh. I'm in the flesh. I got to do everything through the flesh. The flesh is highly involved, but I got to make that flesh, as Paul said, in Galatians, 1 Corinthians 9:27, I got to make it my slave and tell my body, you're not the boss here. I'll tell you when you can have your comfort. You don't get to pick that, body. I'll tell you when you can have your pleasure. I'll tell you when you can have attention. I'll tell you when you can have control. You don't get to pick those things. But the people who focus on those things, and I would argue that that is the bane of our current culture going back 50, 60 years, at least into the 1960s, is that intense focus on the flesh and the comfort of the flesh. And we have this ideology in our culture. You may not have it, but our culture has it. The purpose of life is to avoid anything that I deem to be uncomfortable. The purpose of life is to be in that sweet spot, and whatever that is, because that's going to vary from person to person. But the purpose of life is for me to be in my little sweet spot where I think everything's going comfortable and smooth and easy. Now, for some people, that means a six-pack of beer and Monday night TV, a recliner, a wife that doesn't walk between him and the TV, and he gets to watch TV, and his team wins more often than not. Now, for some of us, that means getting to play with grandkids. A little more moral than a six-pack of beer and a football game, isn't it, you know? For some of us, it means different things. Some people love yard work, you know, and what have you, and that's their sweet spot, and the yard's supposed to always look pretty and wonderful and what have you. But whatever area you choose and you focus on, that area is going to grow. And the spiritual is where we have to be. Because if we don't have the Spirit, we just missed it. And so when we focus on the Spirit, and we understand that we are to be walking in the footsteps of Jesus, and we give prayer and scripture and service to others and obedience more and more attention. And we learn to let that be our joy. So now we got to go back to John 4:34, right? Where he said, my food, my meat is to do the will of the Father. Now I know that doesn't say my joy is to do the will of the Father, but how many of you enjoy being hungry? How many of you sit around and go, I just want to fast? I want my stomach just to feel like it's in knots, and I want my whole gut to be growling, going, give me food, give me food. Because when I'm miserable like that, I'm so happy. You know, that's a pretty rare person. That does happen, but it's a pretty rare person. When he says my meat is to do the will of my Father, that necessarily implies his joy is there also. Sitting down to a big meal, isn't that fun? Sit down to a big meal, and you gather with those who share in the meal. That's what we want. And what we feed grows. Now, we can tell ourselves any story we want. We can tell the narrative however we want it, and America's learned that quite well. Well, the fact is, your hunger is going to follow your habits. And if you want to do an experiment, I got to be cautious. If you have a sugar problem, don't do this. Otherwise, I want you to do this little experience. I want you to buy about 10, 15 Hershey bars, because it's going to cost you $20 nowadays. And at 10 o'clock, I want you to eat your Hershey bar. 10 o'clock in the morning. Or you can choose 2 in the afternoon, whatever works for you. And tomorrow, do the same thing. And the next day, do the same thing. And then tell me, how many days is it before your body goes, hey, dude, it's 10 o'clock. Where's my chocolate bar? Because now the body's grown used to it. And it's the habit. Now, if you don't have the restraint to reel that habit in, you can start having that chocolate bar at 2 o'clock. You have one at 10 o'clock, 2, 10, whatever. You get the idea. It's going to keep growing on you. That's the way that works. So we have these people, and this is the big one. It's the immature faith. And people are just going, well, how much do I have to do? Tell me, come on, preacher. Now, don't give me all this stuff. Just tell me, what's the minimum I have to do to squeak by so that when I stand at the pearly gate, Jesus will go, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter into your master's rest. Now, let me number one say, as I usually do with this question, if you ask that question, you've already missed it. What did Matthew 22:37 say? Love the Lord your God with most of your heart, most of your soul, most of your being. And the minimum amount is 67%. And as long as you give me 68, boom, you're in. That's nowhere near close to Matthew 22:37-38, is it? It's all. Matthew 26:33. Seek about third the kingdom of heaven. I know you got other things you want to do. Get your football game in there first. Get your scrolling in first. And then if you got time left toward the end of the day, seek the kingdom of God. You get me in the first top things on your list. Then I'll say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Look, once we ask, how much do I have to do? Let's be honest with ourselves. Once I'm saying, what's the least I have to do? Now all I'm doing is paying my fire insurance. And God's about excited at that as you are about paying your auto insurance and your home insurance and your whatever else it is. So if work is seen as a burden hanging over your head, you just don't get it yet. We haven't stepped up to the level of Christianity of Christ, because what did Christ say in John 4:34? My meat, my food is to do the will of the Father who sent me. That's where his joy came in. And once that became his joy, it ran through everything he did in his life. Whether it was teaching or accepting the children unto himself or bearing hardships or working so long that he could sleep in a boat while the storm raged and everybody else was freaking out. Whatever it was, joy was weaving through it because his food was to do the will of the Father. The will of the Father wasn't a burden hanging over his head. It was something he enjoyed, loved, had a passion to do. What do we call it? You may not be familiar with it, but I'm pretty sure you are. We call it the passion of Christ. So we have a growing faith. Now we ask, what more can I do? Where can I grow? So we have the heart that's changing. And when the heart changes, work carries joy. And of course, we were created for good works, right? Ephesians 2:10. So joy doesn't make the road easy. It's just reminding us where the road leads. Let's go to Hebrews 12 and verse 2. We won't tarry here long, but let's just hit it quickly. Let's do verse 1 because it'll come in later in the lesson. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witness surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He had a joy. He saw the joy. The joy was intertwined. And if you're a marathon runner or a runner of any kind, you get the idea. You're out there hitting the pavement and it's hard and you're sweating. You're hoping somebody's at the next station with a Gatorade or something or another. But every time that foot lands, you're happy. You're happy. You're happy. It's joy. It's joy. It's where you want to be. And it doesn't have to be that. You can take other examples like I used earlier. The person who loves the yard work and thinks yard work and flowers and bushes and trimmed hedges are so beautiful. They're out there sweating, they're working, they're fighting the weeds, and they're working with nature and fighting the bugs. And they're happy as can be, because that's exactly where the heart wants to be. This is the idea that we have. So the presence of pain, and it's going to be there. Nobody's figured out how to get out of it. It doesn't mean there's no joy there. This is the thing that I think America's missed. There's joy in pain. Whether you want to call the pain joy or you want to divide it up and go, oh no, the joy is just another thread that weaves along, and then there happens to be the pain there too. I don't care how you do that academically, but our joy doesn't mean our sacrifices will be painless. Sacrifices still hurt. Christ, for the joy set before him, endured the things that were before him, and yet when he laid out his body on the cross, I don't even want to begin to try to imagine what all of that must have felt like. But it makes the sacrifice worth it, doesn't it? Isn't motherhood a good example of that? Moms do what? They sacrifice hour after hour after hour, year after year. Now it's more like decade after decade. When I was young, we used to say when they're 18, they're out. Is that true anymore? Now you go when they're 30, well, they might be out. We don't know about that. But anyway, it is the love that makes the sacrifice worth it and makes it all a joy. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, I would do that one again. So sometimes the burden's going to stay there. It's not going to leave us. In 2 Corinthians 12:19, that of course is where Paul was praying that God would remove the thorn in his flesh. You know the story. God did not remove it. The thorn did not get changed. But Paul's vision, his understanding changed. And this is the vital part. And this is what so many people are missing. And you got a lot of shallow religion out there teaching that everything ought to be happy and fluffy and rainbows and roses or something or other. Paul's understanding is the only thing that changed. And then when he understood that God's grace was sufficient, then he goes on to say, I will take pleasure. And then he lists several troubles. In fact, let's jump over there really quick and just read that. 2 Corinthians 12. Well, I better get to 2 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians is a good passage, but it just wouldn't fit the lesson right now, right? And so he says, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am well content with weakness, insults, distress, persecutions, and difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So we're never teaching that you're going to get to that point where all of your problems go away. That would be a lie. What we're saying is the pressure is going to reveal in us what we need to see. And a lot of times that's just to expand our understanding, a growing maturity of spirituality. So in James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, he says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. And then he tells us to let the testing of our faith have its perfect work. Sometimes what that pressure is going to reveal is that I have a weakness I need to work on. That I have an expectation of the way life is supposed to be that's a foolish, stupid expectation that keeps getting perpetuated by Hollywood and marketers and Walmart and whoever else the marketers are who keep saying, no, 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 you buy our product, your life would be better. You get this product, your life would be better. This next product, your life would be better. And the funny thing is, we have so many products and stuff in our life now. We have stuff on our cell phone we don't even know what to do with. Man, our life ought to be heaven. I got more stuff on my iPad, my computer, than I even begin to understand. My life ought to be heaven on earth. And then you can get everything else added into your life. And some of us have got more stuff on our car than we know what to do with. Boy, I ought to really be happy now. And then the advertisement comes out and says, your car ain't good enough. It's 3 years old. It's 4 years old. Your phone's out of date. Your computer's out of date. Your whatever's out of date. And what we have is the marketers tying in and keying in on that stupid expectation we have that if I can just get some more stuff in my life, I will have the joy and happiness I want. No, you won't. And sometimes the pressure reveals how tough we are and how strong we are. And sometimes we can look back at it after the event and go, wow, I didn't know I could get through that. It hurt. It was hard, but I did it. I didn't come in first place maybe, but I crossed the finish line. At least they didn't have to take me off on a stretcher or something or another. So the pressure is there to teach us. You know how I say it. And if you've seen us in our t-shirts that Carrie made for us, it says it's all training. And I absolutely stand behind that. So our lessons in life require us to get in there and endure it, to get the grind. So patience. I can study about patience. I can read psychological books about patience all day long. Will that make me patient? How do you learn patience? You deal with impatient people, right? You deal with circumstances that you want over now. And the doctor says, no, not now. You got to wait till 34 weeks. And the Bodfords are learning something about patience right now, aren't they? Now we pray for them as they go through that. And we know other families that do the same thing. They're in situations that, yes, I want it over now. No, I would rather that it never happened. But God says, no, you got to trust me. And this is where trust comes in. I'm in a situation where I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to unfold. I know how I want it to unfold. I know how I hope it unfolds. But I've got to trust God. And that brings in my endurance, because I can't develop endurance sitting in a recliner. I have to go through the difficulties of life. Whether we're talking about something a little more favorable, like 4 years of college. That's why college students used to get hired preferentially, is because they proved they could stand a 4-year course and hold up and complete it. That was better than a high school grad. I'm not sure that holds out now. And then courage. You get courage when? Not while hiding behind your mama's skirt. You get courage when you're out there on the front line facing whatever challenge it is. Now, it doesn't have to be life or death. It's just, I got a challenge, and I'm going to have the courage to get through this. And in all of that is going to be woven that thing of joy, where you look yourself in the mirror and appreciate yourself. So the thing we have to be careful is not to end the lesson before it has taught us what we're trying to learn. And that means we've got to let endurance have its perfect result, as James 1:4 would say. We've got to stay in there with it. We've got to endure this thing all the way to the end. So the question is not, is it just sinful? This becomes a troublesome question. I mean, 1 Corinthians 10:23. Too many people think, well, if it's not blatantly a sin, well, what's the deal? Paul said, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. And if you go back to that Hebrews 12:1 passage we read a moment ago, he said, we lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, so we can run that race with endurance. Notice he mentioned two things. There are encumbrances. There are things that are not necessarily moral, but they get in the way. Some things are lawful, but they're still a weight. We're running a race, and we're supposed to have our joy in running the race. That's where the joy takes its core. Is I'm in the race, I'm here now, and I'm moving forward. So the better question is this helping me run? Is this making me stronger? Now, I know people can rationalize things to no end and go, oh yeah, if I wasn't drinking a 6-pack a day, I'd be a horrible Christian. If I wasn't smoking weed and getting high every evening, boy, I'd be so mean to my wife. Definitely, I'm a better Christian because I'm intoxicated. I get how rationalization can work. Get that nonsense out of your head. You recognize it. Is what I'm doing helping me be a better spiritual runner? And if it's not, then why am I dragging that weight with me? Why am I holding on to it? Isn't the goal to run the race the best I can run it? I don't want to carry a lot of luggage. I want to set that luggage off on the side of the road and run. So every weight we remove creates some room for us to have a better prayer life or better service to our brothers and sisters in Christ, or to study better, or to fellowship. And that, to me, that's that working together. We're not just giving something up. We're clearing off a path so we can move better. And that clear path's not the same thing as momentum. Motion forward. It's not, you can have a clear path and just sit on the side of the road. Now, if you're not sure about that, I don't highly recommend this, but give it a try. On your way home, I want you to pull over on the shoulder of the road and just sit there. The lane in front of you be as clear as can be. So you got a clear path. That's all you need. How soon you going to get home as long as you're sitting on the side of the road without motion? That's a silly idea, isn't it? Who in their greenest day would go, well, I'm in the car, I'm on the road. Well, no, we're not moving, but we ought to be home by now, shouldn't we? People do that spiritually all the time. Just sit on the side of the path and go, well, I'm not doing anything horribly wicked. I'm not robbing banks. I'm not selling drugs to elementary school teachers or students, teachers too, probably. I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. Until you take advantage of the freedom that laying weights aside gives you, you're not going to get the forward momentum. So we have God's grace and we work out our salvation. That's Philippians 4:12 and 13, where he says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Now, God's got his part to do also. He's coming in and he's working in us also through his word, but we've got to do it. And so we look at the truth and we practice it. And as we do that, we build character. Let's talk about patience again. The truth is, I got to develop some patience. How am I going to do it? I got to practice. If I practice at it enough, I'm going to become a more patient person. Forgiveness. People hurt us. People say stupid and harmful and ugly things to us sometimes. Sometimes they're so ignorant they don't even know what they said. I got to realize that I got to practice it. And as I practice forgiveness, then I developed a character. Self-control is the same way. So we grow by practicing. Now, if your whole heart desire is to become more like Christ, I want to be more. Okay, let me do it this way. How many times have we said in prayers, Lord, help us to be better Christians today than we were yesterday? Sometimes it's worded, help us to be better Christians tomorrow than we were today. Either wording's fine. If that is the passion of our heart, then the process is a joy. It's a lot of fun. It brings us a delight amidst the pain. But you're going to keep working at it, right? Paul was honest. He said, I'm not there yet. I'm moving ahead. He says, I press on. I'd run out of time or I'd push that one a little further. So God's got something going on. We're the apprentice, and God's working with us, and we think, okay, God's trying to build a table, for example. Yeah, maybe so. God's got a little something more going on. He's trying to build a Christian. Farmer once was asked, he said, well, you don't have to work your kids as hard as you're working them all the time to raise a farm. And the farmer said, I know. I'm not just raising a farm. I'm raising a family. And he understood the hard work that was necessary to raise a family. So the work is intended to change us. This is the whole thing. I don't know why our culture has missed it. Let me do the James 4 thing, James 1. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials. How did we miss that as a culture? How did we become so obsessed with life's got to be perpetual comfort and I've got to minimize any unpleasantry as much as I can? God's not just doing something through us. He's doing something in us. And our labor will not be in vain in the Lord if we keep our heart where our heart should be. So it can be small work, it can be unseen work, it can be difficult work, it can be the redundancy of life, it can be the very extreme cases of life, but none of it's empty. Remember Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, do it as heartily as unto the Lord. So the labor eventually ends, and it does eventually end. Revelation 14:13, he said, I heard a voice from heaven saying, blessed are those who die in the Lord, that they may rest from their labors and their deeds follow them. There's a time of rest to come. The thing we forget is this isn't it. This is not the time of rest. The time of rest is when the medical profession says to your family, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but your mama, your grandma, your grandpa, whoever, they didn't make it. Now, when they tell you that about me, I want you to think his time of rest has begun. That's when it begins. Blessed are they who die in the Lord, that they may rest from their labors. And while we all need little times of rest in between now and then, if we prioritize it as though it's something special, then we've taken the bait of Satan. So when becoming like Jesus is what we truly want, then the work itself will be a joy. Let me read that one more time. When becoming like Jesus is your passion, then the work of becoming like Jesus and all those things it entails is going to be your joy. And today's going to be joyful, and tomorrow's going to be joyful, and you get to live to be 114. Every one of those days is going to be joyful because you're doing what your passion is, and that is to be like Christ. Are you doing your passion? Is it time to go home and have a little, as they call it, come to Jesus talk with yourself? Have you been putting on a front here at the building? Easy to do. I got this together. I'm all spiritual. But in your heart, you know something different. I don't think everything requires you to come down to the front and make a public confession. But if you're in a situation where you think that would be helpful and give you strength, we are here to encourage you however we can, while together we stand and sing.